Evening, everyone. You are watching Montgomery County Republican Club's Direct Line. Our guest, we've been promising, we've had technical difficulties, we've had all sorts of issues. Our guest tonight is Blanquita Cullum, the hard question. I've met Blanquita back when we worked together at NET Free Congress, the first conservative news network founded by the legend himself, Paul Weyrich.
Good man.
And our other host, I will be co-hosting, filling in for Mark Onkofer, and I'm running the board at the same time, so it'll be an interesting show. And Jackie Saxteen is our co-host. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started. Tell us about yourself, Blanquita.
Well, let's see. Where do I begin? Because I've been in broadcasting and working in politics for more years, and I'm going to start lying about how many years I've been in broadcasting pretty soon. But started off in radio and television in San Antonio, Texas, and took a leap of faith and moved to Washington, D.C., and did radio and television, worked in politics, worked for 3 presidents, and ironically, you'll be surprised, one that I actually worked for. I worked for President George Herbert Walker Bush. I worked for President George W. Bush when I was on the Broadcasting Board of Governors. And when he left office, I even worked for a brief period of time during the transition for Barack Obama. So it's been an interesting journey. And I have had the honor and pleasure of being in radio and continue to be in radio and television to the present day. And also a co-founder of a great organization called Voices Against Trafficking. So there you go. That's me, just like fast.
In a nutshell, yeah.
In a nutshell.
So what did your role entail when you were working with these different presidents?
Well, when I started and I first got here, some of your old skills come in handy. When I worked in radio in Texas, I worked in everything from rock and roll to television, anchoring the news. And I came to Washington, and a friend of mine was on the transition. They said, would be happy if you would MC one of the presidential inaugural balls, the Hispanic inaugural ball. And they got so much money from that, and I had done a good job for them. They gave me a shot, it was a 90-day job working at FEMA. I ended up becoming the White House liaison at FEMA. Just briefly before that, I worked at the census, but I learned a lot of lessons at FEMA, and that's how I first started in Washington. Ultimately, after Mr. Bush did not win his reelection, I went back into radio and television, and then ultimately worked for President George W. Bush.
So was broadcasting kind of always what you wanted to do? Or were you a little girl and you grew up and you're like, yeah, I want to do radio. I want to do broadcasting.
Well, let me tell you about that. Actually, I've always been kind of a ham. I think it's always been in my blood, but I was a studio artist. I was a painter and a sculptress, and I did all of that. I went to University of Texas, studio art, and I had a job for a while as a studio artist for the PBS station. My dad passed away young, and went to San Antonio to be with my mother, who was grieving after my father's death, and I had to find a job. And I didn't want to have to work as an artist in a department store. And she said, there's a job at a radio station. You're a big ham. She said, I'm going to drive you over there and you're going to get that job. So she said, I'll wait in the car. Go and get the job. Okay, it was to be a copywriter at a country western radio station. And I was telling you before we got started that the general manager said to me, well, darling, can you type? And I said, well, sure, but I really didn't know how to type that well. And he said, and can you write commercials? I said, yeah, I can write commercials. He said, what's your name, by the way? And I said, Blanquita. He goes, no, that's not right. He said, we can't fit it on a belt buckle, darling. We can't say it. And he said, I don't think you know that here we already have radio announcers. So I don't think you're going to get a job here. And I asked him, I said, well, is it okay if there's a part in a commercial for a woman, if I could take it? He said, sure. But see, I wrote all the commercials. So I wrote myself into all the commercials.
That's how you do it.
And that's how I did it. And another station heard me, and that's how I got my break.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, so it's definitely awesome going into your background and everything, but we also want to talk a little bit about current events. You are currently a resident of Virginia. So you
She had
had,
her broom out last night.
yeah,
She
I
swept
did.
away the Democrats.
a very exciting night. And going into today, even with, I'm
New
a
Jersey is still,
girl.
that's the icing on the cake from last night,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yep, I grew up in New Jersey, and even just beyond the elections themselves, also some of the reforms, the ballot initiatives in Minneapolis and Seattle and Austin. So there was a lot to take in. What were your initial reactions as the night progressed? I mean, I know with Fox, it was a lot of, everyone was prepared for Virginia. No one had any data or anything to go on with New Jersey because no one was expecting it.
Well, I think it's a little deeper than even Fox has suggested. Because, I think that there were things that there was an arrogance within the Democratic Party that they thought they could get by with. And I'm talking about with the governor when he had his blackface issue, and you had the same thing that happened with the lieutenant governor who had an issue, and the attorney general had his own issues. You had the lieutenant governor, I think, was accused of assault. And I think when the governor thought he could get by, it was only 4 years and he wasn't going to resign, that kind of stayed with people. It felt like there was a double standard. Everything arose later when you had the situation with schools and the idea you had that little 14-year-old girl that was assaulted, and the father, and in righteous indignation, he's the one they arrest, and they say, you don't get the right to speak, and then the kid is transferred to another school. I think there was righteous indignation. I have a very good friend, actually, who's a Democrat, and he talks about the missing middle. And there was no place for the middle, which is why you even saw Democrats cross over, because it was more not right versus left. It was right versus wrong. And I think that they couldn't stand the idea. First of all, it's like you have to listen when people tell you things. When McAuliffe tells you you don't want white teachers because immediately you're going to assume that they're racist. That parents don't have the right to complain about what's being taught to their children. People say, okay, I'm hearing you. And I may even be your same party, but you know what? I don't like you. I don't like that you think that you have more rights than I do. And that's not what Virginia is about. It all kind of started in Virginia. So I wasn't surprised about that. And also, I thought it was a beautiful thing to see that you had the lieutenant governor being the first African American woman, Governor Winsome Sears, a Dutton Toten African American who is really about her rights as an individual, not looking at her race, but looking at her brain power and her qualifications. She's exactly what Martin Luther King talked about, looking at the quality of her character. And then you have Jason Minares, who was very interesting too as the Attorney General, because, I got to tell you honestly, as a Latina, my mother was a Mexican citizen her entire life. My father's family came in from Liverpool. In fact, where they lived was when you cross over the Key Bridge and going into Georgetown. There's a little area where they have a bicycle shop. That's where my dad lived when he
Oh,
was
really? Revolution's bicycles.
exactly. We lived on the top of that. So I'm kind of first generation American, but the fact of the matter is they don't know who Latinos are. Here you got this great new lieutenant governor, and his mother, he talks about her with so much pride because she escaped Cuba. They didn't have any money. They came to this country basically with nothing because they wanted freedom. My own sister-in-law talked about escaping, who was Cuban American, escaping with their family, where she was held over with a building. They were trying to find her father. She and her 3-year-old sister, she was 5, over an apartment complex, and they were going to drop her unless the mother told them where the father was, because they wanted to kill the father. Fortunately, he wasn't killed. They escaped. But people who have had to escape this kind of violent degradation and denial of rights, I'm thankful that guy's now going to be the attorney general. I think we have equal justice under the law with a guy like that. So, and the other thing is, I really believe growing up I had my grandmother lived in Tijuana. I grew up by choice. I could have been a dual citizen. I chose not to be. I am proud to be an American citizen, but I totally understand the idea of what the heart and core soul of Latinos is, and they don't know who we are.
Yeah.
They look at us as, that we're easily manipulated,
Yeah.
that we don't identify with this country. I think about the number of Latinos that have served in the United States military, how many of them have won the Congressional Medal of Honor, how many of them are now serving on the Border Patrol and along the South Texas border and San Diego between Tijuana and California. And they are, like I am. They're from families that were Latinos that are Americans. And they just haven't got a clue who we are. And also they put us in one box. You're either Mexican. They don't know the difference between a Puerto Rican, a Cuban, a Salvadorian, a Honduran, an Argentinian, a Chilean. We're all different. A Venezuelan.
How many times have I said that on this show, Dwight?
Yes, many times. It's very similar to, like,
lump them
if you remember the old Archie Bunker show, the 1970s Democrats, Chinese, Japanese, you're all Orientals, and that was, and that's what the Democrats, did, and they do that now, and they don't understand that Hispanics they have got family values. Most of them are pro-life. Most of them don't. Most of them work hard. The American dream is alive and well, which, according to, if you listen to Obama, Biden, and Harris and any other Democrat, they'd say the American dream is dead because it was taken from you by the white man. I can point to thousands of stories of people that have come here with nothing and made it. And don't tell them the American dream is dead. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your race is. You work hard, everybody can succeed in America. And that's the one thing that is missing, I think. Maybe they should start teaching that in school, no matter who you are, where you come from. Ben Carson came from poverty. We've got, a number of cases. There's a friend of mine I know, he has a high school education. He has a $5 million HVAC business. There's another friend of mine from the Eastern Shore who grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which is, Eastern Shore is not Montgomery County, Maryland. It's very different. And he's now living the American dream, and there's our executive director's uncle, who is now in Maryland. I think he's part owner of, he's actually owner of the Glory Days Grills, and he started off as a dishwasher. Tell me that is not the American dream, where a dishwasher becomes own the chain of Glory Days.
And I can remember even as a little girl going to Tijuana, we'd go every week to go see my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And you're a little child and you're just silly, and I'd see the pictures of the painted Elvises on velvet and stuff, and I'd laugh about it. Mm-hmm. And my mother would say to me, never laugh at anyone like that, because they are very creative and they don't want to be taking any kind of handout. They go out and they're learning how to sell things so that they can earn for their family. I mean, it was a slap in my brain because I looked at it differently, and you have to have a great deal of honor for that. But when I was growing up, Mexico was very proud of having a middle class. And they were like the jewel of all these countries in Latin America, because, they were proud of elevating the middle class. And they had the Abraham Lincoln of Mexico was Benito Juárez, who said, al derecho al respeto ajeno es la paz. The right of respecting everyone is peace. And so they came through a lot. Now I feel that we are trying to make it too simplified for the brutality that's happening to the people that are coming in the caravans, many of whom are not from Mexico, but from other countries, as far as China, Venezuela, all over from the Middle East. We're not being honest about the human trafficking, a terrible situation that rivals the drug situation, because we're trying to be politically correct. We're not helping Latin America. If I were in a situation, I would love to see that we had respect to meet with the leaders of these countries. The oil companies, I don't think Americans realize, Pemex, which is the oil company for Mexico, made a deal. I'm sorry, I almost lost my computer there. Made a deal with the United States to be able to go in and have the oil guys help in the processing of oil. Now, the Americans really didn't benefit by the sale, but they helped them with their methods and their processing. They changed the Constitution. Mexico has oil, Mexico has gold, Mexico has silver. El Salvador, they've got products, they've got flowers, they've got fruit they've got, you name it. Why can't we work with, Salvador, Honduras, think about it, Nicaragua. Nicaragua was going to build another version of the Panama Canal, owned and operated by the Chinese, larger, but fortunately, they didn't do it. You think about the jeopardy. When I was a governor on the Broadcasting Board of Governors, I had to go spend a lot of time in Venezuela when Chavez was there. I don't think Americans really understand the threat. Iran is there. Syria is there. China has a huge area that not even the Venezuelans can enter into. What is there? Is that satellites? What are they doing there? You have the Russians there. You have they tried to do that same thing in Colombia, and that whole Ecuador, that whole area, Bolivia with Evo Morales. We need to know who is in our backyard, and we need to understand what's going on and deal with it in a way that empowers the ability of a middle class to exist and to make sure that corruption is not permitted, because right now the cartels are taken over. And the cartels, think about right now with Afghanistan and the heroin, it can go right through Bolivia to Venezuela, and to where does it end up?
To the streets of Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. and the big cities of America and small towns. In Maryland, we got a couple of small towns like Salisbury, Maryland, Hagerstown. They are quickly becoming the meth capital of the state of Maryland. There is such a heroin problem in both of those cities. And you wouldn't think, looking on paper, a small town America like Salisbury, Maryland, would have such a heroin problem.
Aren't we a sanctuary city here too in Montgomery?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Our county sanctuary.
Well, who are you trying to give sanctuary to? You're giving sanctuary to cartels, to human traffickers?
We don't know. Illegal aliens. We don't know.
You're not giving sanctuary to people that need the protection. Let me tell you a terrible situation. As I mentioned, this Voices Against Trafficking.com, if you all want to check it out. And we deal with a lot of different groups that are trying to help these victims of human trafficking. One situation came from one of our members who was out of Tijuana, who has safe houses there. They worked very carefully to try to get this young man out because he was being hounded by the cartels that wanted to traffic him. So they got him to Baltimore, and they got him in what they thought was a safe house in Baltimore. And who did he encounter in that safe house but one of the traffickers that was trying to pass off as being a kid?
Yeah.
So you've got the cartels in Mount Vernon. You've got the cartels that have been there for 20 years.
And now you're combining that with the legislation they're trying to pass that Biden is claiming doesn't exist. Maybe they just didn't tell them about it, that they're going to give $450,000 to these people who are crossing over illegally, who were separated families at the border, when we have seen, that these cartels are not afraid to take a child and pass them off as their own kid just to say that they're here as a family. So where is that money going to go right back to? It's going to go right back to the cartels and shepherding over more people against their will and drugs.
Think about all the poverty on the border right now. In places like Tijuana on the border, it's always been a very dire situation. But you have, for example, in Brownsville, Texas, in Eagle Pass, in McAllen, you have people that are struggling with all these people that are coming across that are ruining their property. A lot of those are Latin American people. They're like me. They have a foot in one culture and a foot in another. And in fact, the idea that $450,000, think about that. What would you do with $450,000? Think about in your family. You could get somebody a heart transplant, at least get them started. You could take care of putting your kids in school. You could start your own business. It is an injustice to people that work hard in this country and are trying to make a go of it. I was reminded years ago, I had the opportunity to interview one of the great comics in history. and he played God. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, George Burns.
George Burns. He was a real sweetheart. And he said to me, "Kid, I think you're going to do okay." He said, "But I want you to remember one thing. Don't forget the folks who buy the tickets." And you think about that in politics right now. That's just what happened in Virginia. They forgot the folks who buy the tickets, who pay the bills, who educate their kids, who took the time to contribute to their campaigns,
Hmm.
who go to church on Sunday, who stand up for the flag and go to service. They forgot the folks who buy the tickets. You see it certainly in Hollywood, where they think they've, been given a divine right to tell you how to live your life and run your store. What I'd really like to see out of those people is for them to make a decent movie.
Yes, and stop making these remakes. It's like you think they'd have an original idea.
Oh, see,
And
I saw my favorite joke. I mean, it's on a Jewish humor page, but applies to a ton of things now. It says that they just released the safe for TV version of Blazing Saddles. It airs at 8 o'clock and it's over at 8:07.
That's hilarious, because think about all the comics right now.
yeah.
They can't, that are refusing to go perform. Guys like Seinfeld. You know, I used to go a lot to California during the time that Politically Correct was done out of California with
Yeah,
Bill
with
Maher.
Bill Maher, yeah.
And Bill Maher at that time, he didn't like me so much because, I was conservative and still am. But I mean, he didn't think we had much in common, but we have a lot in common. And what we have in common, which I'm proud to see him stand up for, is the First Amendment, the freedom of speech.
Yep.
And, that's why it's the first. It's really the most important. And that's the thing that they've tried to deny for us. I've been around the world in places like China and see what's happened with Hong Kong, where that is completely, that's in such dire straits. Taiwan, that's being threatened. Russia, Ukraine, my God, Venezuela, places even like Cambodia and Vietnam, where we had to try, when I was a governor overseeing Radio Free Asia, to get people out of a prison that wanted to carry the Voice of America and the BBC. So I'm proud that he is realizing that how important that message is, to stand up against the cancel culture on freedom of speech. And guys like I say, Seinfeld and Dave Chappelle,
Yeah.
others. I mean,
And
J.K. Rowling.
yeah.
For, freedom of speech is being able to say something that you don't like to hear, and have someone say something back to you that you don't want to hear.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, BQ, growing up, one of my favorite shows was the I Love Lucy program. We were talking about that in a class I took at Maryland called Politics and Television. You'd been surprised there wasn't a single black person on the show. They go, I'm like, but it still doesn't detract from it. It was a good show. She was a
But
pioneer.
she did something that was remarkable. She had a Cuban husband. They didn't want, they wanted her to have a regular all-American guy.
Yep.
She insisted that she had the Cuban husband. And she also was the first person that was able to be pregnant on television. That didn't happen before.
Yeah.
You couldn't even say the word pregnant when she was on TV.
Yeah. And what they do is they take you have these liberals and universities saying, "Oh well, they should have had more blacks on the show, representation." I mean, the Andrew Griffith show got the same sort of criticism. They go, there wasn't a single black person living in Mayberry. They weren't even talking about the Vietnam War in Mayberry.
Well, what I don't understand about that, though, is instead of trying to change history or talk about how history was wrong, celebrate how far we've come since then, right? Is that everyone wants to say, oh, well, we come from a racist past, we're systemically racist. First of all, we're not. But second of all, talk about the fact that instead of critical race theory, teach history, right? Yes, we used to have slaves. Is it something that we're proud of? No, we're not, but it happened. And look where we are now. Not only do we not have slaves, we've had a black president. We still
have slaves. Let me tell you something. Okay, I think that was a shameful period, and you can't clean it up. But I can tell you this. First of all, if you look at majority of families, and I'll bet if you look at your own, in my family, we have blacks and whites, Hispanics, we have Christians, we've got Jews, we've got agnostics, we've got straights and gays. We've got a whole bunch of folks, and we're all related. Okay, do we all get along? Most of the time. Okay, that's the beauty of what's happened in these years, that people have been able to intermarry and do a lot of stuff. But the other thing I think that is important is what I wrote a chapter about in this new book that we're putting out, and I hope that I'll be able to share it with you when it comes out, and it's Voices Against Trafficking. You have the cry of no more slavery, and people want reparation. But the truth of it is, there's more slavery. Why are these voices not crying out about the millions of victims of human trafficking going on right now? Why are they not trying to stop it at the border? Why are they not dealing with the child brides in Afghanistan? Why are they not talking about slavery right now? Because maybe it's too messy for them. You know, human trafficking is as much money. It's in the multi-hundreds of billions of dollars. A child is abused and trafficked every 40 seconds. Now, you don't think that's 21st century slavery? I mean, honest to God, I'm disgusted with the people that say they're going to start looking back, but they don't look right now to the present and stop slavery now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's very, at least it seems from the left, very much a focus on one particular minority that they feel has been more oppressed than any, and they ignore things like human trafficking, things like the rise in anti-Semitism, that doesn't fit their narrative. That's not, well, we're more focused on this one, as if when there are, I would say the majority of Black people saying, I don't feel oppressed, I've been given.
I don't know whether all Black people do or do not. I cannot speak for them. I do know that there is a child somewhere right now that wishes to God someone would be able to know that they were in trouble. And the founder of Voices Against Trafficking is a very brave woman by the name of Andy Berger. Andy Berger was trafficked from the age of 6 months to 17 years old. And you think about the courage that it takes to be able to get away and to live your life, and not just live your life, but to try to save lives. I think we become a very narcissistic group of people that, it's after me, you come first. If people started thinking about how can I make a difference for the good? You have this wonderful new attorney general that is out there in Virginia. His family escaped from Cuba. He can make a difference. You have that wonderful woman that's going to be the lieutenant governor. She can make a difference. I mean, and Jackie, you've been talking about anti-Semitism. My brother was Jewish. You make a difference. You can choose to make a difference.
Yeah, we're doing it here. I actually recently started a PAC with a great group of Jewish Republicans in Maryland, the Maryland Republican Jewish Council. I'm sure Dwight will plug that at the end of the show.
Yes, it is a great organization. They're one of our.
And our mission is to call out anti-Semitism where we see it on both sides of the aisle. I don't care if you're Marjorie Taylor Greene or you're the Squad. Anti-Semitism is wrong.
Yeah. And one thing I think is, and maybe it's because I'm a Republican and some say I'm being a partisan hack, but let me tell you, Republicans are not afraid of drawing the line in the sand against hate, bigotry. Abraham Lincoln did that. George W. Bush did that. We had brave Republicans in the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate that passed the Civil Rights Act that LBJ signed. That failed when the Democrats had the opportunity to bring it up. You had Robert KKK Byrd filibuster to prevent the Civil Rights Act. It's a sad, Dinesh D'Souza had a great movie out a few years ago, if you remember.
Yes.
Yeah. And, that is not taught in history class. And they have the big lie saying, all the Southern Democrats became Republicans. No, they didn't. All those Southern Democrats, I think only 2 flipped over and became Republicans. You had people like Al Gore Sr. lost his election to Bill Brock because he voted against the Civil Rights Act. And people champion Al Gore Sr. and Al Gore.
Well, remember this: the first African American members of Congress were from Texas, and it was right after the Civil War. And of course, you talk about drawing a line in the sand because I'm originally from San Antonio, home of the Alamo.
Yeah,
means a lot, and the great variety of people that were there in that 13-day siege. They were Americans, they were Texicans, they were Mexicans, they were English, Australians, they were Black, they were children and women. They were a lot of people that believed in the right of self-determination, and that's really what this is all about. the great foundation of America.
Yeah.
We weren't throwing tea in the harbor because we don't like tea. We were throwing tea in the harbor because we wanted the right of self-determination, to be able to make that choice. Well, why do you think the storm of people coming across right now the border, they want to come here, even if they're driven here, because they know that this is the great hope of freedom. They've lived in situations where they didn't have that right of self-determination. But in that group of people, most of them, I say many of them are very well-intentioned, but you have a lot of thugs too. And I think we have the right to be able to determine who should be able to come into this country.
And we did that around the turn of the century when we had the first wave of immigrants coming from Ireland and Europe. We turned people away at Ellis Island every day. While the recklessness of bringing in the Afghan refugees, now you have parts of Central Virginia where they got these measles outbreaks because somebody didn't do their job.
And you also have Americans who are stuck in Afghanistan.
Exactly, and again, that all goes back to this administration. I think last night's election results is all a total compilation of 10 months of Joe Biden's regime, where I don't think he's had a single victory. And I think one thing they can point to is $1,400, giving that away. That's like his big successes. I gave you $1,400, but
I mean, that's it's patting you on the head.
Yeah, exactly.
On the head, and while you're there, will you get me the coffee?
Exactly.
Really, that's offensive in so many ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That I'm surprised at, because my father was a Democrat. Yeah. This is not the Democratic Party of my father.
No, it's not the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton even today.
It's not. And again, the missing middle that is there, which you'll see regardless of who is elected president. Generally, people come toward the middle so they can work together. There is an arrogance right now of this progressive left that really cares, again, more about their ability to score the point than to be able to work to try to benefit the country, whether it's, honest to difference of opinion, and they have Democratic Party principles. Most of the time you would have people come together to try to be able to work and make an outcome that both sides can live with. Yep. And right now, I mean, Pelosi, I think she's got her last, she wants to have her last days of glory, but she's not going to be speaker much longer.
No.
And a lot of these Dems know that their time is ticking, come the turn of the new year. Not only, I think a lot of them know that their time is up, but also they're going to be busy campaigning, that this is really their last chance to get this stuff pushed through. But back to what you were saying earlier about you need to remember the people who are buying the tickets. I think a lot of these politicians have forgotten the people who they're meant to be representing. And I think that's where we have to give Joe Manchin a lot of credit. We have to give Kristen Sinema a lot of credit for saying, look, maybe I personally think this is a great idea, although I think Joe Manchin's made it very clear he doesn't. But I need to consider the people I represent, the people of West Virginia who are not progressive and who are a lot more moderate and may not, a lot closer to independent than they are to either side.
Well, look what they've lost. Look what they've lost with coal.
Yeah.
Look what they've lost with energy. We were energy independent. Yeah. We didn't have to worry about going to war for oil. We had oil. We had shale. We had all kinds of coal. We had, and we had windmills, and we had all the.
We did all of the above for solutions for making us energy independent. And so it worked. We did solar. We did fracking. We did coal. We did nuclear. We did drilling for oil. We did all the above solutions. Just like, with transportation, a lot of people always talk about traffic. I mean, you're in the DMV, you understand all the traffic. People think mass transit is a panacea. You got to try everything. You can't just rely on one.
Well, let me ask you this, Dwight. And I have a lot of respect for you, and I've been friends for many years. I mean, again, the idea that they would say that there would be requests to have Russia produce more, and to have OPEC, Saudi Arabia, produce more. In a way, you say, well, on one side of your mouth, you're saying that we have to respect climate change. We don't want to hurt the environment. It's okay. Let them hurt their environment. Let them hurt their people. You see, if we all did a little even if you're trying to think more in the middle. And really, for this country, the next thing we know is they're talking about having the draft open for women. That's something they're not talking about, but that's next.
Yeah.
And if we go to war, which, you've got Taiwan that's in jeopardy, you've got situation with the Middle East now that we've lost the air base out there, and, people are seeing that we're vulnerable. Do we really want to rely on international oil as opposed to our own ability to protect? I mean, when we have the Canadians and their oil and our energy here, and the relationship with Mexico, we were the strongest force in energy in the world.
And I remember Joe Biden, he's against our pipeline, but he's okay with the Russians having their pipeline go across, which basically will let them squeeze the Ukraine pretty much as they see fit, so to speak.
Well, and again, I was
in jeopardy.
I was listening to Manchin earlier, and they were interviewing him, and he was talking exactly about that. And he was saying, the audacity that Joe Biden would ask OPEC to produce more oil, when he said, I wish he would let us just frack in West Virginia. He said, we should be drilling because he said, if we can make a pipeline here, we have a ton of natural energy that we could start producing right in West Virginia. And
right.
This is coming from a Democrat. This is not a partisan issue. This is honestly,
not right versus left, but right versus wrong.
Exactly.
People need to stop seeing everything in terms of red and blue, Republican, Democrat, and just start thinking about the issue for the issue itself. I think that's where we need to find common ground.
Jackie, you're right, because when I was young and we would talk about people having to go to war in Vietnam, and and then we were worried about oil and what was going on in Saudi Arabia and who was going to determine the price of the oil, and we had problems in the 80s, and we're not stupid. And I think right now, hopefully, there's enough muscle memory from that period of time to help us to make different choices.
Absolutely. You have to consider even something that's a little bit more polarizing. Like, people think, oh my God, Joe Manchin, a pro-life Democrat. How could he? Right? Like that's some mortal sin. You can't be both. When it's like, people have lost the idea that there is a spectrum, right? It's not, if you're a Republican, you only agree with every Republican issue. If you're a Democrat, you only agree with every Democrat issue. I think if we start seeing more candidates who are not afraid to speak against necessarily some of their party's firm beliefs and say, well, no, this is the party of, this is my beliefs. This is who I am.
I mean, Jackie, you probably don't remember this, but BQ and I probably remember this from history lessons when William F. Buckley spoke out against the radicals and hate mongers within the Republican Party by condemning the John Birch Society.
Right.
See, we take our extremists to task. There is no William F. Buckley in the Democrat Party to take their extremists.
There was an old song. I don't know if you remember it, but there was this, about the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society. If mommy is a commie, then you gotta turn her in. But that makes me remember those days quite a bit with the Smothers Brothers and a lot of those crazy shows and the roasts that they had. You couldn't do those roasts that they had.
You could not. I mean,
because we can't laugh at ourselves like we used to.
Yeah.
I mean, Victor Borgo would be run off the stage today.
But do you think seeing that, some of these candidates, whether that's Joe Manchin or whether that's, Youngkin or whoever that we're seeing recently who's coming out and saying, forget the label next to my name. This is what I support. This is what I believe. You saw a lot of Democrats cross the aisle to vote for Youngkin because their parents first. It's not about the D or the R. It's about their children, right? So do you think that we'll start to see a rise in candidates coming out saying, I'm just going to tell you my personal opinion on these, because that's the only way you're going to get people to cross the aisle.
They'll do it in quiet. They're going to, right now, people are, they're so deathly afraid of the cancel culture.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you brought out Jackie, and it really made me think about it too, because, and you remember this, Dwight.
Yeah.
There would be blue dog Democrats.
Yeah.
And there would be, we looked at people in the shape of moderates, conservatives, and progressives.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should get rid of the title of Democrat and Republican.
I remember Zell Miller, and even our late friend Paul Wyrick was very good friends with Senator Paul Simon of Illinois, and if Paul Wyrick and Paul Simon can find common ground, shouldn't we all be able to find common ground,
Well, we can be polite with each other. We can go out
Exactly.
to dinner with each other. And, I
Mhm.
have a lot of friends of radio talk shows, as Dwight,
Yeah.
who have completely different points of view. But isn't that the great thing, is that you can be able to talk about things and debate things? And
Mhm.
maybe I won't agree with you, or
Yeah.
maybe you won't agree with me, but
Yeah.
we'll be able to have a great intellectual conversation and be richer for it.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I think is missing today, BQ. I don't know if you noticed that, like social media, I think is really put. I mean, I've lost so many friends from high school that basically, couldn't
Yeah.
stay, basically could not tolerate me pointing out the ills of the Democrat Party, you know. And they go, "Oh, you're going to unfriend me." The minute I say, I go, "I'm not going to unfriend any of you folks. So we were friends in high school, And they're the ones who eventually unfriend because they get offended because I say, "Oh, President Trump is great. George W. Bush was one of our greatest presidents. He saved us from terrorism, stuff like that." I mean, you can't tell you basically, it's kind of like you can't criticize them for their own faults. It's like, oh my God, we are. It's like I was talking to one of my very, very liberal friends from high school. We were talking about BLM. I go, don't you think there's a problem with BLM when there's a child being murdered playing in their front yard in the inner cities of Chicago, and BLM is silent on that, but BLM can't shut up about things like hands up, don't shoot, which never happened,
Well, and I think that what was it this past year in Chicago, under this particular leadership, there's
Mhm.
been 628 murders. I mean, it's just frightening about what's happened to Chicago, and the community that has to suffer with it. And the idea that they want to dismiss the ability for law enforcement. Back in the day, I remember when I was working again in San Antonio, and we started the Crime Stoppers program. This would be around 1981. And the great thing that happened then, you used to see it really a long time ago in New York and places like Chicago and Los Angeles, where there was more community policing, where the cops used to go on the street and people used to know who they were, and they felt safer and they had a better relationship. And it was, you'd have, even in the 80s and the 90s in San Antonio, they'd have McGruff, the crime dog. And
Oh, I remember him.
and it was to try to let people know that they were safe. But I feel bad for people that are in law enforcement. I feel bad for first responders, for whether it's firefighters, even nurses and doctors who are overwhelmed. Right now, people need a little respect.
I think that's what we all need is, regardless of whoever you're talking to, if your political opinions differ, show them respect. Just say, well, let's agree to disagree and walk away. There's no need for the name calling. There's no need for, I mean, we've just lost touch with each other as a society because everything has become so divisive and so political. And again, to your point, with the first responders, we're seeing them retire in droves. Nobody, but Minneapolis, when given the opportunity yesterday to vote to dismantle their police, they said, you know what? No, like
Right.
we tried that and we saw a huge spike in crime. So no, we
Mhm.
actually do want to keep our police. I'm all about, and I think I would say most Republicans are for saying, yeah, let's try some police reform. Let's make the system better, but getting rid of it is not the answer.
Remember, it was President Trump that advocated prison reform. It wasn't Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Bill Clinton. It was President Trump that took the initiative and actually brought in real prison reform and dismantled some of the recidivism rates in the prison system.
I think it will be so interesting to see how the Republican Party works in trying to help to encourage people of all different areas to run for office, because right now there's going to be a lot of opportunity, from local school boards to state reps and senators and council people and I mean, at the local level, running for positions like judges that make a lot of difference in the formation of the future of the state. That's where I think we have to see a lot of wisdom and encouragement, because the opportunity is now.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really inspiring note to end on. We are in our last minute. So, Blanquita, we do want to give you the opportunity as our guest to plug anything that you want to. I know you talked about Voices Against Trafficking in your book. What else do you have to plug for us?
Well, and I just want to encourage everybody to have a grateful heart and know there's hope, but definitely go to voicesagainsttrafficking.com. And I hope to be back on your wonderful show.
We'd love to have you on again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We definitely have to have you on with Kendall.
Absolutely. When we have, actually, we're going to have Kendall and Susan Allen on in a couple weeks.
Oh,
maybe,
I love them.
Maybe we could have you on as a co-host.
Of course.
Stay tuned for that episode, folks. And then from our end, we do have to plug First Thursday tomorrow at Mama Lucia in Falls Grove. And I'm the one giving the plug because the guest speakers are Meet the Maryland Republican Jewish Council. So I'm the founder and advisor, but I put together an incredible board of people. A lot of people I'm sure who watch the show know Marie Fisher. She's been around in Maryland and been super involved in the Republican Party for a while. She is an inspiration. She's done so much to help get this thing up and running. And I'm excited to introduce everyone to our board. So if you're free tomorrow and you like pizza and you like Jewish people, come on out.
And don't forget, December 5th is the 10th annual Republicans Christmas party and Toys for Tots drive. I think we've collected probably over 10,000 toys in the 10 years we've been doing this. And one of the years we got hit with a massive ice storm, we still had 150 people show up to bring. That's dedication. Wow. Our party is going to be Sunday, December 5th from 1 to 3 at the Rockville Sheraton, and there'll be details on Montgomery County Republican Club.com website. And we're inviting a lot of guests, including I just put out the invitation to our next governor, Kelly Schulz. We've invited her to be there, as well as our comptroller candidate, Barry Glassman, and our AG candidate, Jim Shallak. Great bunch of people. And we need to bring you over more and more on this side of the river to some of our Republican events, because they've started a Hispanic club as well.
Great. Qué bueno.
Yeah.
Éxito.
Yeah. So
lots of good stuff to plug. Blanquita, thank you so much for joining us. We'll absolutely have you back again soon. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Dwight, it's great to see you on camera once for an episode. And we will be back next Wednesday with another episode. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.